After my previous video on the Springfield 3, my research led me to a case that was eerily similar and just as baffling: the case of the Fort Worth trio. These cases prompt the question: how did three women disappear together and vanish without a trace, just to have the mystery remain unsolved for decades? Settle in while we dive into the chilling and mysterious unsolved case that changed an entire community, and the cryptic letter that was sent to one of the victims' families the day after they went missing. Was it a red herring or really authentic? Buckle up and welcome to the Unsolved Society. On December 23rd, 1974, just 2 days before the Christmas holiday, Mary Rachel Trlica, age 17, Lisa Renee Wilson, age 14, and Julie Ann Moseley, age 9, disappeared from a shopping mall parking lot in Fort Worth, Texas. Mary Rachel Trlica went by her middle name Rachel, and that's how I'll be referring to her during this video. She was 17 years old at the time and a high school senior at Southwest High School, where she met Lisa Renee Wilson, who goes by Renee, and that's how I'll be referring to her in this video. At the time of her disappearance, Rachel was still in high school and had already been married to her high school sweetheart, Tommy, who was age 23 at the time, for 6 months. Coincidentally, Tommy had previously dated Rachel's older sister, Deborah, who was 19, with whom the two were actually living with at the time of the disappearances. Some reports say the relationship wasn't serious, while others say that Deborah and Tommy were actually previously engaged. Either way, apparently when they broke up, there was no bad blood between the two. It must not have been a super awkward situation between the two sisters now that one of them was married to the other's ex-boyfriend. Although I can't imagine marrying my sibling's ex-partner, no matter how young we were at the time. It just sounds like a recipe for awkward interactions, holidays, family gatherings, etc. Obviously, it must not have been that awkward because they did choose to all live together. Lisa Renee Wilson, or Renee, like I had mentioned calling her before, they went to the same school and they were close friends. Their families were actually close and would do camping trips together, and even though they were a few years apart, they still remained good friends. The day of their disappearance, Renee had spent the morning at little Julie's house. At that time, Renee was actually dating Julie's older brother, Terry. On the morning of the disappearance, Terry had given Renee a promise ring, which she was notably excited about. Renee had invited Terry to the mall with the girls that day, but he instead decided to go to a friend's house instead. Little Julie had nothing to do that day and asked to tag along. They agreed, but only if her mother said yes. So little Julie called her mom to see if it was okay, but her mom was hesitant to let her go. After much begging and pleading that she didn't want to be bored and alone all day, her mother finally agreed. Renee also spoke with her mother just to confirm that she would pick her up at her great-grandmother's house at around 4 p.m., just because she had an important party that she wanted to attend that evening. So at around noon that day, the three girls piled into Rachel's 1972 Oldsmobile and set off to do some last-minute Christmas shopping. Their first stop was at an Army-Navy surplus store to pick up an item that Rachel had on layaway. After their first stop, the three girls headed to the Seminary South Shopping Center, and they parked in the north upper parking lot near Sears. The three went inside the shopping mall, unaware that this regular day of shopping would change their lives and many others forever. At 6 p.m., as the sun began to set, and still no word from the three girls, Rachel's family went to the mall to look for them. They scoured all the different stores and paged the mall to look for them through the intercom, but there was still no trace. What they did find was Rachel's car still sitting in the Sears parking lot, full of presents that many assumed they bought from the mall that day. With no trace of the girls and the sun setting on another day, the desperate family members reached out to police, only to be pacified with the possibility that the three girls could have run away together. The Fort Worth Police Department thought this was a reasonable assumption, as Rachel's older sister Deborah had run away in the past. Although, I think that is an incredibly bold assumption to make now that three young girls were missing together. It seems incredibly strange that they would choose to also take 9-year-old Julie with them. The following day, so now Christmas Eve, a strange letter seemingly written by Rachel was delivered to Tommy Trlica, her husband. The letter appeared to be handwritten and said, "I'm gonna catch it, but we had to get away. We're going to Houston. See you in about a week. The car is in the Sears upper lot. Love, Rachel." Now, there has been a lot of speculation and theory surrounding this entire case, but this letter has been particularly notable for a few reasons. For example, the letter itself was written in ink, while the envelope had been addressed using pencil. The letter was also addressed to Thomas A. Trlica, not what Rachel usually called him, which was Tommy. Rachel's name had also been written in the upper left-hand corner of the envelope, but looked as though it had initially been misspelled. Instead of the L at the end of Rachel's name, it looked like an E instead, as though it was spelled Rachie. It looked as though the author had retraced over the wrong letter to correctly spell the name Rachel. There was no return address or a postmark, just a difficult to read zip code that many believe was applied using a hand-loaded stamp because the number 3 appeared to be written backwards, although some speculate that it was just a partially stamped number 8 as well. The zip code is believed to be either 76038 or 76088, which is either Eliasville, Texas or Weatherford, Texas. Numerous handwriting experts across the United States have analyzed this letter, including the FBI, but unfortunately all results have been inconclusive, meaning they're not able to verify that Rachel was the author. Rachel's family has been notably skeptical of this letter and do not believe that she wrote it, and they do not believe that the girls ran away. Rachel's mother, Frances Langston, was quoted as saying, "A lot of people think they left with someone they knew, but I'll always think, until the day that I die, that the girls were taken." They weren't the only ones. Little Julie's mom was quoted as saying, "I know my daughter, and I know those other girls, and they are not runaways." I think it's important to note as well just how strange the timing of this letter was. The girls go missing, then the very next day, a letter is delivered. It just seems like such a short amount of time to write and mail a letter and then have it be delivered. I do suppose it is possible, but this was 1974. Next, on New Year's Eve, and still no sign of the women, a female caller contacted the Wilson residence and claimed to be a friend of Renee's. She stated that the 3 girls would be arriving on a bus from Houston to Fort Worth at around 7:25 p.m. that day. Obviously, the Wilsons were frantic when they got this news and immediately contacted the other families. All 3 families gathered at the Greyhound bus station at around 7:25 p.m., but that time came and went. A bus did arrive from Houston at 7:25 p.m., but the girls were not on it. A majority of the family members stayed till around 8:30, while Renee's father, Richard, and Rachel's husband, Tommy, stuck around till about midnight before calling it quits. After the girls never arrived, this call was assumed to be completely fake, especially since none of Renee's friends recognized the name that was given to Renee's mom over the phone. Unfortunately, these types of cruel pranks are common with families of missing children. Over the years, many people came out of the woodwork, including various psychics, that claimed that they knew where the girls were. But none of these leads ever panned out, just adding to the many hopeless leads that the families would have to explore over the years. Just a month after the girls went missing, another phone call would come in. At 11 a.m. one chilly morning, the phone rang at the residence of Julie Moseley's family. Her mother answers, says hello, and gets no reply. She says hello again before she plans to hang up, but then hears what she believes to be a little girl's voice saying, "Mama." Now, because of all the cruel prank calls they had been getting over the years, her mother began to plead with the caller, saying, "If this is a joke, please stop. I can't take it anymore." She then asks again if the caller is Julie Ann, and they respond yes. Her mother begins to frantically beg her daughter where she is, and at this point she's sure it's her. The girl's voice is able to get out one more "mama" before the line goes dead. Julie's mom stood up the phone sobbing and in shock. She has recounted her voice as sounding sick or drugged. This red herring didn't stop the families from continuing to desperately search for the missing girls. Missing flyers were distributed throughout the state, and the media began to pick up on the story. From the large effort, tips began to roll into police. A young man who is friends with Rachel came forward, claiming to have seen Rachel and the girls, along with an unknown man, in a record section of a department store at the mall on the day they disappeared. He claims the two spoke briefly before going on their own way. Another potential sighting came from a store clerk who had claimed to have seen the 3 women being hustled, quote unquote, into a yellow pickup truck near Buddy's grocery store on the day they went missing. I do think it's notable, as a similar sighting came forward to investigators in 1981, who claimed to have seen an unidentified man force a girl or girls into a van in the mall's parking lot. The witness says that when he approached the group, the man brushed it off as like a family dispute and that the witness should have just stayed out of it. However, like many of the tips and sightings reported, this was unable to be verified. Frustrated by the lack of substantial leads or evidence, the families decided to band together and actually hire a couple different private investigators. The first by the name of John Swaim. John Swaim began by traveling to Port Lavaca, Texas, accompanied by 100 volunteers to explore a lead that the girls had been potentially killed and transported there. But this tip turned out to be another dead end. He spent quite a few years pursuing leads, but died in 1979 from a drug overdose and an apparent. Strangely, as one of his final wishes, he asked that all of his case files be destroyed, including all of his documentation about the Fort Worth trio, which is just so strange to me and frankly makes me very, very suspicious of John Swaim. I'm not saying he's possibly responsible or anything like that. It just makes me feel like he's trying to hide something. And why wouldn't he want to pass on any useful information to these families that are still so desperate for answers? Maybe he knew his files were just full of nothing and he was almost embarrassed. I don't know. Comment below what you guys think. Like I mentioned previously, there was a second investigator hired, and his name was Dan James. Dan had been following the case unofficially since 1975, and it was hired by the families in 1996. By this time, Rusty, Rachel's younger brother, who had been 11 at the time of the girls' disappearance, had stepped in to continue driving the effort for answers. And by 1999, Dan James announced a $25,000 reward of his own money for information leading to the arrest and conviction of who was responsible for the girls' kidnappings. As time went on, his investigation also allegedly revealed a few strange and suspicious details about the family dynamic between Rachel and her sister Deborah. I do want to note that this is all speculation and this is just for discussion purposes only, and that much of what Dan has said has been unable to be substantiated. However, Dan James has alleged that Tommy could have been potentially having an affair with Deborah, Rachel's older sister, who he had been previously engaged to. And he also believes that Rachel was cheating on Tommy as well. He also believes that Deborah and Rachel had an unknown disagreement at a bowling alley the evening before the trio went missing. However, James has made it very clear in the past that there is no proof that Deborah, Rachel's sister, was in any way involved in her younger sister's disappearance. And Deborah herself has strongly denied these allegations. Despite Deborah's denial, the other families still cast a shadow of doubt on Deborah's story of no involvement, including her younger brother Rusty, who has been very vocal about his suspicion of his older sister. However, Deborah says, quote unquote, "I know he blames me. I know he thinks I had something to do with it. Rusty thinks this letter that Tommy got the next day, he thinks I wrote it. I didn't write this letter. I don't know who did it. I don't know what happened to my sister. Maybe white slavery. That's the only thing that makes sense to me. I have nothing to hide." The other family members apparently asked her to double down when she released this quote, and they sent her a signed letter asking her to cooperate with the FBI and take a polygraph test. I think it's really interesting that so many people close to the three women have voiced such skepticism for Deborah. What do you guys make of this? Do you think that Deborah was involved or just kind of like a scapegoat? Comment below. As a result of all this ongoing speculation, family ties between Rusty and Deborah became more and more estranged. When Deborah had a drug overdose and was in the hospital, he went to make a plea for information just in case she passed away. Deborah and Rusty's mother, however, has blamed the private investigator Dan James for quote-unquote poisoning her son's mind, and is even sometimes referred to James as the devil. Many have described Rusty as being obsessed with this case to an unhealthy degree. Dan even became concerned about the lengths Rusty would go to get answers and stopped forwarding any relevant information or leads to him. Dan James went on to drop some more bombshells in an interview in 2000 with the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. He said that he believes that Rachel was still alive and would visit the Fort Worth area every Christmas. He goes on to say that he does believe the two other girls, Renee and Julie, are deceased. Again, take these claims with a grain of salt because he's been very unclear about why he believes those things. He was quoted as saying, "I believe a person facilitates and maintains an effort to keep Rachel Trlica away from Fort Worth. I believe that Renee Wilson is not alive. I believe that something dreadfully wrong and probably a fatality occurred involving Julie Ann Moseley." Wow, what a big allegation to drop with relatively no context. And he did not stop there. He went on to make another disturbing allegation, specifically centered around the family of Rachel, Deborah, and Rusty. He claims that the previous image we had of this family being Beaver Cleaver-esque was not an accurate representation. He claims that Raymond Cotton Arnold, father to Rachel, Deborah, and Rusty, was cruel and physically abusive to his two daughters. To some extent, Rusty has confirmed this himself by recollecting a time where his father, this is graphic, beat Deborah so severely that he saw quote-unquote blood run down her legs. And another time pointed a gun at their mother and threatened to kill her during a heated argument. James was once quoted as saying he doesn't know if Cotton was directly involved in the disappearance, but he had motivation for Rachel to be missing. He goes on to say, I think Rachel was pregnant with Mr. Arnold's child when she went missing. When Rusty got word of these disturbing allegations, of course he had to pursue this theory. He went to great lengths to exhume his father's body and get DNA evidence that could possibly connect him to writing that letter, being that that letter is the only piece of physical evidence this case has. Even Rachel's car was never processed at the time of their disappearance because police assumed the three girls were runaways. Rusty watched as technicians sawed into the femur they recovered from his father's remains. Unfortunately, too much time had passed and they were unable to extract any DNA. And once again, the case hit a dead end. In more recent years, Rusty has continued to work this case almost daily, going to great lengths such as recovering a submerged car from Binbrook Lake after reports it was abandoned around the time the girls went missing. Unfortunately, nothing was found in connection to the case in that search. Tommy Trlica filed for divorce from his missing wife Rachel less than 2 years after her disappearance. He ended up moving away from Fort Worth and has been remarried numerous times since. Many of the parents and loved ones passed away without ever knowing what happened to those three girls. Notably, Julie's mother Ryan struggled with mental health issues for decades, understandably, after her daughter's disappearance, and passed away tragically without any answers. If you or anyone you know has information about the whereabouts of Julie Ann Moseley, Renee Wilson, or Rachel Trlica, please contact the Fort Worth Police Department at 817-392-4200. Gosh, what a strange case. It is so puzzling for me to think about three young women disappearing in broad daylight and then their case remaining unsolved for decades. It's just something that I cannot wrap my mind around. But I want to know what you guys think happened. Do you think that the girls were maybe taken by somebody they knew, or was it a random predator just taking the opportunity to strike? Tell me in the comments below. And thank you for watching this video. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel for more unsolved true crime and mystery videos. And I will see you solvers in the next one. Bye.